of that. There's been a change in my role at CDOT. And I should tell Sean as well, who I haven't talked to just yet. I'll no longer be the traffic safety manager. So there will be an interim traffic safety manager in my spot. I did invite him today. I don't know if he will come and join us. His name is Brian Tarleton. But until they backfill my role, I will do my best to continue to come to these, just so there's no void from the Charlotte region.
Well, what we'll do is we'll go ahead and get started. We got a couple minutes after. I know we'll probably have some folks coming in after the fact, and that's okay. But rather than going around the room and doing a full introduction, I believe everybody could probably look on their people item there and see who's involved in the meeting. But what we'll do is our next in-person meeting, we'll go through the normal hello everybody and take up that a good 10-15 minutes time. So we'll go ahead and get started. I'm Kevin Lacey. I'm the Director of Strategic Planning and Programming for North Carolina Department of Transportation. And this is our Executive Committee for Highway Safety. And I want to welcome everyone. And we're going to start off with our serious and fatal injury trends update. So, Chris, it looks like Brian and Sean have wrangled you into this role. Thank you, sir.
Yeah, that's what it appears to be. We'll see if we can share in the fun here, some of these upcoming meetings. But I guess in the meantime, see if I can get started here. So our 2022 statewide fatality number, it does continue to be down when compared to our 2021 numbers. At our January meeting, our fatalities were down 2.5%. So while we have continued to see some increases in the reported numbers, we currently are still down 1% when compared to last year's numbers. So we typically see fewer increases in our numbers kind of starting in May. So we're hopeful that we will actually be able to maintain this decrease from last year's total. So a bit of good news to start the meeting. So when comparing our year-to-date 2022 and 2023 fatality trends from our January to April, for the emphasis areas found in the Strategic Highway Safety Plan, with the exception of the bicyclist fatalities, we currently are seeing a decrease in all areas. So I'll just point out a couple of the emphasis areas. We're currently seeing our largest reduction in the alertness category, with the 44% decrease. The substance impaired driving emphasis area, currently seeing a 40% decrease. The pedestrian emphasis area is currently seeing a 29% decrease. And the older driver emphasis area is currently seeing a decrease of 24%. So now, while there was a 13% reduction from 2021 to 2022 as reported in April, and while the numbers are small, we currently are seeing an increase in the year-to-date bicyclist category, which is showing a 60% increase. Again, at our January meeting, our statewide serious injuries, they were down 4.1%. when compared to the 2021 numbers. And while the numbers have slightly increased, we continue to see a reduction of 3.3% in our serious injuries we compared to our 2021 numbers. Unfortunately, unlike our statewide fatalities, when comparing the year-to-date 2022 and 2023 serious injury trends, from January to April for our strategic highway safety plan, the emphasis areas, we currently are seeing increases in most areas. Again, just pointing out a couple of the emphasis areas. While the numbers are small, the bicyclist category is currently seeing the largest increase, which the numbers have about doubled. The young drivers emphasis area is currently seeing a 22% increase. The speed emphasis area is currently seeing an 18% increase. And we currently are seeing our largest decrease on the substance impaired driving category with 11% decrease. So as you can see, we have some good and bad news, but hopefully over the next couple of months, our year-to-date fatalities will continue to decrease, and hopefully we'll see some decreases in more of our serious injury emphasis area categories. So not sure if there are any questions.
Chris, you got a question?
Yeah, thanks. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you there, but I think it was 2 slides ago where you have your line chart. Yeah. So the one you just flashed on there a second ago.
Go back over there, right there, Chris.
Yeah. So with the orange line, I mean, every year I see this chart and I always have the same question, but I've never asked it. So I want to ask it now. And then you can all laugh at me and tell me never ask it again. But when you all changed the definition, or when the definition for serious injury was changed, right? That's where we saw this big jump in the numbers. And my question is, have you ever gone, I think I've asked the question, have you gone backwards and looked at it with the newer definition? And I think you guys said you couldn't do that. So my curiosity is there some way to look at either, the left side or the right side of that orange line to tell us whether or not the trend is actually the same or not, right? So can you look at 2017 through 2022 with the old definition and say, oh, well, we're in a comparable trend line to where we were before? And the reality is the change in definition would have shown larger numbers between 2002 and 2016. Or is there just no way to do that? Because we always get the question of what happened in 2017, right? And the answer, well, the definition changed. That is an answer, but it doesn't really get at their root question of what is really going on here, and are we really seeing an increase, and were we actually seeing an increase all along, or are we staying comparable to where, to the trend that we were actually seeing in 2007 and 8 and 9, or is there a way to compare across the line, just to be able to say, look, if we'd had this same definition in 2002, here's where the numbers might have been, and we're trending in the wrong direction, or we're trending in the right direction.
Chris, I'm going to try to give you an answer, and I'm going to ask Sean and others to weigh in if I stray too far. We tried looking at that a number of times, and because of the definition that the officer report on how they report it, it makes it very difficult. Now, one of the things that we believe, based upon you can see the 2015, 2016. And then the 2017 conversation, that in 2016, the definition changed. It was somewhere around October-ish. So it wasn't really at a calendar year. So some of that change had some effect in the 2016 data as well. So what we believe is, or a good estimate is that the old numbers would double if we had a similar definition applied backwards. Now, is it 100%, 110, 100, or 90% or 85? But that's kind of a rough, I would say back of the napkin estimate, simply based upon, we see in 2015, from 2014 to 2015, we had a slight increase anyway. And because the definition changed in 2016, we think that helped sharpen that line some. And then in 2017, it had a full year of the change, and that's what made that steep increase. So that Sean, Chris, others,
Yeah, that's correct. I mean, the definition change was in September, and it took time for all the agencies to come on board. It's likely that the severe injuries that you see before that change and after were probably very similar. It's just when you have basically a one sentence paragraph to assist an officer in assessing an injury rate versus I believe it's a 7 bullet set of bullets to say if a person has any of these 7 items, it needs to be an A injury. So the definition really gave an officer more opportunity to be more accurate. I mean, they're not medical personnel. And so with that 7 bullet set, if you see this, it is an A injury. If you see this, it is an A injury. And before is kind of a loose term of incapacitating injury. So what does that mean? And this really gives it a definition set. So, Kevin was right. I don't know if it's double. I don't know if it's 80% or 120%, but the numbers are kind of going to be similar, before or after that line. But it is very hard to go back and compare, right? Because we don't have any other evidence than what's on the 349, the DMV 349 to be able to assess that.
Appreciate that. I think that's really helpful. The thing that caught one of our at Campo's executive board members' eye whenever they see this is this sharp increase and then almost flat, right?
Yeah.
And that particular board member, local elected official, fancies themselves as a statistician. So they had a lot of questions about that we haven't really ever been able to give them answers. So while it is not, while it shouldn't be treated as hey, we're doing a great job and hey, pack it up, we're all done. I think it is helpful for folks to understand those numbers would be somewhere between a 75 to 100% increase over what you're seeing to the left of the line. The trend after the line is still, for several years going in the wrong direction, and there's obviously lots needs to be done. And hopefully the 2021 to 22 trend will continue. But this is certainly helpful to better educate folks that it's not a situation where all of a sudden, we were spending the same amount of money and crashes just doubled, or nearly doubled. So that's helpful. Thank you.
Yeah. And Chris, we've talked about, excluding that pre-2017 data from these slides as we move forward. And, you can go 50-50 on that. I mean, we haven't decided to eliminate them yet because it's still part of the trend in the story in North Carolina. And so, maybe we need to get some more thought to that.
They can do that.
Yeah. Right.
and Sean, doesn't it still fall within the performance metrics of the federal highways? We're still in that overlap area
Yes.
for that measure as well, which that doesn't help in the calculations, but Chris, I think that's thank you for bringing that up. That's an excellent conversation about that change. And it's anything that we can do to help clarify that with any of your members and so forth, we'll be glad to do so.
Chris, I'll dig back to, I think we had a couple slides. We tried to explain this several years ago. I'll see if I can find that. And I don't know if that'll assist you or not, but I'll see if I can find that and get you a copy of them.
Thank you.
All right. Any additional questions? And
Kevin, it looks like we have one in the chat.
all right.
Sarah O'Brien. I wonder if a study could attempt to tackle this question by trying to link to actual medical records to the police reports for a period of time before and after the definition change to attempt to calculate an adjustment factor. Yeah, we've got a couple projects that are going on through the TRCC trying to link those records, and that's a very tough thing to do as well, because you have the Personal Information Act on both sides of the data, whether it be the DMV or the DMV 349 piece or the medical record piece. So there has been some adjustment, and yeah, like Angela said, the medical definition is a lot different than the officer definition. So there's been some work done on that, and I think they were able to link. I think it was somewhere around in the 60% range. So it's still not a perfect process, but it can be done, but it takes a lot of work to do it.
And
Good point there.
And part of that change is that there's another injury rating scale, I believe it's called the MAIS or something of that nature, that does have a little bit more refinement. And this definition change that was done at the federal level is trying to get those different scales better aligned as well. So, all right. Sean, if you would keep an eye on the chat for me, I appreciate it. I'll watch for the hand raising. And Chris, you're up next on the preliminary safety performance measures.
All right. It's as we typically do in our May meeting, we just kind of want to bring the committee up to speed on our safety performance measures. So with the MAP 21 FAST Act rulemaking, requires the state DOTs and MPOs to set targets for the 5 highway safety improvement program safety performance metrics that you see in the middle of the screen. So our targets, they're actually based on the 5-year rolling averages and are set for calendar years. 3 of the targets, your number of fatalities, your fatality rate, and your number of serious injuries, they must be identical to the targets found in our governor's highway safety program, highway safety plan. In our state, we have and we continue to coordinate and assist our MPOs with establishing their calendar year safety targets. Our statewide safety targets, they're actually based on the 2019 North Carolina Strategic Highway Safety Plan goal to reduce all fatalities and serious injuries by half by 2035, moving towards 0 by 2050. So with the update of our current Strategic Highway Safety Plan, we will again ask our statewide safety partners to craft language for a revised statewide goal. And once that language is crafted, we will do it just as we did with the 2019 Strategic Highway Safety Plan. We'll ask the Executive Committee for Highway Safety members to set the goal for the 2024 North Carolina Strategic Highway Safety Plan update. These are actually the numbers that were recently reported as of April 20th, 2023 from our Federal Highway Administration partners for our calendar year 2021 safety performance target assessment. So the Federal Highway, they give states the ability to set their own targets. And as a state that sets aggressive targets, we again have not met or made significant progress towards achieving our calendar year 2021 target. So what does that mean? We will again be completing and submitting a highway safety improvement program implementation plan, and we will be using our fiscal year 2024 funding for safety projects. So in terms of the calendar year 2024 targets, again, they were based on the 2019 North Carolina Strategic Highway Safety Plan goal. So the targets are set. So once we actually, we'll actually publish the final targets once the baselines for the FARS data, for our VMTs, and for our North Carolina crash data has been stabilized. So That's actually the last slide. I'm not sure if there are any questions for our preliminary safety performance measures.
I do want to make a comment about setting the targets and so forth. There are a number of states who will go out and they'll establish targets based upon their current trends. And if your current trend is like ours, where we're up, then you're actually setting targets that may have a higher number of injuries and fatalities than you've had the previous year. The penalty for not meeting these performance metrics from the federal level is that you have to spend all of your HSIP funds in HSIP. You'll also have HSIP is Highway Safety Improvement Program funds. There's also some other target items within there that have other penalty items, such as if we do not meet the non-motorized fatalities and serious injuries, then we're required to appropriate, 15% of our HSIP funding in those areas. And then there's also some older driver and rural road measures as well that we have what's called penalties on those as well. Our state has historically spent the vast majority of our HSIP funds in these areas, in the safety area. A number of years ago, we modified our funding criteria. We actually did start stratifying, and our goal is to spend 15% of our funding. But basically, we stratified our funding towards what we call the big rocks, the big numbers: lane departures, intersections, and non-motorized fatalities. If you look at our trends, you'll see that those are the largest areas that have the highest fatalities and injuries. So that's why we're focusing on those. It does take a few years for these things to work their way in, and we will, we all recognize that from 2020 to present has been a little bit, been a significantly different environment. So this year we have been informed by Federal Highways that we didn't meet our targets, nor did we make significant progress. So we'll have some additional reporting to do to Federal Highways. Phil and Brian and others will be working on that. I'm sure Mark will be involved as well. Just wanted to give everybody our position has been is we think it should ratchet down and not allow it to ratchet back up. It's not a defendable position to say that we will accept a higher number of people dying on our roadways next year than what we had this year. And we'll get penalized for it, but it's not a severe penalty. They're not taking money out, but they do scrutinize our programs much more in more detail. Mark, I see you have a question, but Terry had an item in the chat.
Yeah, he just got the old trend line slide set.
All right, thank you, Terry. Mark?
Yeah, and just to piggyback on that, the bipartisan infrastructure law affecting state highway safety offices, or at least the language there, actually prohibits us from having any language and targets that show an increase. So if we were to even ignore what has been our practice here in North Carolina and do that, it would just be bounced back and not accepted. So
yeah, I think that was triggered by the number of states that were setting their targets to things that they could actually meet.
Yep, that's exactly right.
All right. Any further questions, comments on the preliminary safety measures? Our next item is Age My Way, North Carolina Incentive, Mike Olinder. Did I say that correctly?
It's actually Lisa.
Yeah, so it's Lisa Regal. I'm gonna be doing it for Mike, Michael
I'm pretty sure
Hollander.
Lisa's not spelled M-I-K-E. I'm just playing with you, Lisa. Lisa Regal, please,
You just
Please take
completely
it on.
flubbed up that name.
Yeah, so thanks for this opportunity to share the Age My Way initiative here in North Carolina. It's actually the perfect timing because we had some exciting news earlier this week that will make it easier for us to have a pathway for some of you on this call to
Holidays and
participate. So it's good timing. Next slide. Yeah, so I think all of you know AARP is the largest nonprofit, nonpartisan organization advocating for the 50+ so that we can all live the life we want to live as we age. Most of that is like financial security, access to healthcare and caregiving, but a big bucket is our communities, livable communities, so that we can, live a purposeful, abundant life. And that's where you all fit in. Next slide. Hopefully you are all aware that our population in North Carolina is rapidly aging. It looks like it's increasing 52% over the next 2 decades, but we already have more people over 60 than under 18, or we will in the next couple of years. Next slide. And this is especially evident in the rural areas. You can see we have so many counties, 85 counties with populations of 60+ more than younger folks. And that's only expected to increase, especially in the more rural areas. Next slide. You can go to the next slide. I'm going through these kind of quickly. So what does that mean? So AARP is saying, yeah, we have this rapidly aging population. People are not having as many children as they have in the past. Plus, we're living longer. People are moving to North Carolina to retire. So all in all, it's the growing aging population, and we can't just do business as usual. We need to look at our infrastructure and how we provide services in a different way to be sustainable. So what does that look like? You can see people want a community where you can walk, you can bike, you can get around without a car. And really a big piece of it is being able to continue to engage in community and housing. Next slide. So AARP is the North American representative for the World Health Organization in this age-friendly livable communities initiative. And it's based on the 8 domains of livability. And you can see that transportation is one of those core domains, along with housing. And you can see social participation, keeping people involved and not isolated, being able to continue to work so that they have the financial resources when they retire. So these are the 8 domains that were established about, 15 years ago. But we've added a couple extra issues that we think are important to look at, like emergency preparedness. And from North Carolina, that's an important issue to look at. Next slide. As part of this whole age-friendly initiative, we have a framework for helping communities become age-friendly. It's called the Network of Age-Friendly States and Communities. And what a community does is at the very highest level, they say they make a commitment to becoming more age-friendly, and then they develop a framework. How are the elected officials and the staff, the public, community, private sector, nonprofit advocacy organizations going to work together to make that happen? And that's when you enroll. The next step is you assess, where is your community, or what community, where are the gaps? What do you need to do? Like, what is your deficiencies and what does your community want? And then you develop a plan to do that. And I know from working with DOT over the years, you're very familiar with plans and you know the importance of them. Next step, next slide. And that's what the Age My Way initiative really is. So we, a couple of years ago, began working with the governor's office saying, we have this aging population. Seniors are struggling with housing, with providing the services, getting the care that they need, but we need to be doing something differently. So we teamed with the governor's Hometown Strong program which is that rural outreach program that hopefully some of you on this call are familiar with. It focuses on the rural communities and bringing the resources of all the cabinet agencies together. So it's the perfect partner to look at cross-agency work in collaborating on this initiative. And then, of course, DHHS is a critical partner because they are tasked with providing the services to our aging population. So this was an initiative that we launched last year, the beginning of last year, to identify what are the priorities that are needed to focus on and the needs of the population as we begin this initiative. Next slide. So we began with that gap analysis. We surveyed, we have a survey that has, we tweaked it, it's a national survey that we tailored for North Carolina. It takes a long time to fill out, like 20 minutes. So it's amazing that we actually got almost 5,000 responses, but when we analyzed the data, it was a little over 3,000, and we got such a high, a low margin of error that we've just been using that analysis, and we know that if we look at the rest, that it'll be similar. But the point is that we heard from every county, and if you want to see the results of that survey, you can go to that website and look at the income levels, the ethnicities represented, the ages, and just really all the detailed responses from that survey. I'm going to just touch on a few in a minute. Do you want to go to the next slide? Yeah, so it really asks the questions like, what do you like about your community? What's missing? What do you need to be able to stay where you are or where you want to be, and to do the things that you want to do as you age? Next slide. A big finding, which is really great, is that people love North Carolina. They love their communities. Most people plan to stay in the state, and they really want to stay in their community. Now, we say the term age in place. Yes, most people would like to stay in their homes, but a lot of times that's not really realistic. So at least they'd like to stay in their community. Next slide. Yeah, this is not from the survey. This is just data that I think is really important to share around housing. I think housing is the big issue. You'll see at the legislature this year, there's a lot of initiatives to try to do something about housing. Is it appropriate? Is it affordable? And a lot of our country was developed after World War II, when the soldiers came home back and they wanted a house, a couple kids, a dog, more land. So we have, you can see here, over 85% of our housing stock is these larger homes built for more than 2 or more people, 2 bedrooms or more. And actually, because of that changing demographics, we have younger people waiting longer to have kids, having smaller families, having no kids. And then again, that aging population, most of our households are more like 1 to 2 people. So we have a mismatch of stock and what we need. So we know we need to do something differently. We need to remove barriers and encourage more choices in housing, not just because we want more choices, but really a lot of people, as you can see there, are rent burdened. They just can't afford it. So we need to have those choices where we can have options for affordable housing that's more appropriate. And we also need to think about, how do we build the homes? Are they appropriate for this demographics? Next slide. I'm just throwing just hit it a couple times so more information comes on the slide. Yeah, a couple more times, like 4 times. Yeah. So when you look at your house, the houses, we really need also different, using universal design. You can think 1 story. You can reach the light switches, you can turn the doorknobs, wider entrances so that you can get in if you have a walker or a wheelchair. So we need to get more homes also differently built with universal design in mind. Next step, next slide. This is back to the survey. This probably doesn't come as a surprise to many of you that most people want to and do drive themselves. Like you can see 96%. They do take advantage of the other modes of transportation, but most people, that's their access to getting to the doctor, getting to visit their friend, getting their food, is driving themselves around. I don't know if you want me to answer the questions as they come up. It says a house everyone can use. Imagine that. Oh, yes. Next slide. I'm putting this in, this is not from the survey, but I just always like to remind people that although 96% of us drive ourselves around and we want to drive ourselves around, that most of us, because we are living longer, are going to outlive that ability to drive by 7 to 10 years. So that's a long time that we are going to need help or use other modes. And that's just something we want to think about as we develop this plan. Next slide. Yeah, so the key findings are that people want to stay in their community, that they actually really want to stay in their own home. They worry about when they're not going to be able to drive. They worry that they won't be able to afford their living, afford their house. And, that would lead to isolation if you're not in your community and you can't get around. Next slide. And that's why next slide, we're making this really concerted effort to look at what we do with our services and our infrastructure through that age-friendly lens. And when you make the community better for our aging population, you're also making it better for all ages, because the younger people, you heard about the sandwich generation where you're caring for your kids and you're caring for your parent. Well, if it's easier to provide those services to them, it's easier for all of the ages. So this week, the governor signed an executive order directing his cabinet agencies to work together to better prepare for this aging population and make our state the best place to live and grow old in. It was very exciting. I got to be there. You can see me in the picture. Ryan Brumsfield from DOT was there. And at the same time, he did apply to be part of this network. So see that little picture there of a certificate. North Carolina is now part of that network of age-friendly states and communities. So it was, next slide. You can see we have North Carolina is the 10th state. I think that's a nice, good number for us. There were before 9 states and 1 territory. Next slide. We also have 14 communities in North Carolina that have been working on becoming age-friendly, but dating back, I think it's 2015. And this number we expect to grow. And what's great about this is I love that we have an executive order and that we have this framework and a plan for the state, and it will kind of raise the awareness and set the bar and encourage making these plans. But I think that a lot of the change is at the local level. So it's great that many counties and communities are also doing this at the very local level. Next slide. Yeah, so you all know the value of plans. So the plan is an opportunity for, it's a planning for 10 years that aligns the infrastructure. It gets the people working together to really not just be in silos. Next slide. Yeah, I love that this is going to really encourage with this stakeholder group more interaction between the agencies, bringing in the private sector, bringing in groups like AARP, the nonprofit voices and the community voices, and it will have a lot of benefits beyond just the plan. Next slide. This is draft. I should probably have draft marked all over it because, the executive order was just signed this week and we're really in the early stages. DHHS is the lead agency. This is a draft name, all ages, all stages, NC, Roadmap for Living and Aging Well. We have 4 buckets. Affording aging, again, that whole idea of will we have enough, our people aren't saving enough for retirement, that they need to probably work longer. We need to prevent scams. That kind of stuff is in that affording aging. You can imagine what services and supports means about getting the care and access to care and health care that you need. And then the community for a lifetime is where the transportation would fit. Although, of course, transportation will cross all these sectors. We have to try to put them in buckets to look at them more easily. And that's where we will be looking at transportation to see how we can tweak things to make sure that we can all get around as we age. Next slide. And again, this is draft, very draft, but the idea is that at the very bottom, you see these committees. That's where the real work will be done. And we would love for folks on this call to participate in those working groups. Also at the stakeholder advisory committee level. We need thought leaders from across the state that can be part of this. And we're doing this as we speak. So if you want to send me an email, if you are interested in learning more, maybe being invited to that first kickoff meeting, and then maybe if not, then you just me know that you have an interest in participating this, perhaps at the committee level. You know, I know some of you in the call would be great for this. So please feel free to step up and send me some information. Sign me up. Oh, good. Mark's interested. Next one. Next slide. Yeah, so that's wrong. That's the call to action. I would love for you to let me know, and I will let DHHS know about your interest. Next slide. I think that's it. Yeah, and I went through that pretty quickly. Again, the Age My Way has a really great website. Just Google Age My Way NC. It was on that one of those slides. You can see the whole survey and learn more about this initiative. I'm sure you'll be hearing more about this now that there is a you know, an executive order, and we have a plan. We have a plan to have a plan. All right, I see Mark has a question.
Yeah, thanks, Lisa. This is fantastic. So it sounds like Age My Way is a North Carolina specific effort, but that there's other national efforts of a similar ilk. Is Age My, or am I mistaken? Is Age My Way kind of a national AARP campaign, and this is just the North Carolina component of it?
Yeah, that's interesting you asked that. So I would say the nationwide effort is called the AARP Network of Age-Friendly Communities and States. But in North Carolina, when we kicked off this thing last year, we used the theme from the Older Americans Month. By the way, May is Older Americans Month. We are going to have a celebration at the state fairgrounds from 1 to 3, May 9th, if you want to come. We'll learn more about this initiative. But we just used, so this year's theme for Older Americans Month is Aging Unbound or something like that. But last year it was Age My Way. And so we took that theme and used that for our initiative. But that acronym of Age My Way is probably going to go away. I love it personally, but we have now a larger stakeholder group, and we are going to kind of shift it to, because some people don't know what that means. And we think all ages, all stages NC is a better name. So I think that's the name you're going to be seeing for this initiative going forward, with that roadmap to living and aging well as a byline. So yeah, the Age My Way is probably going to go away, but it was fun for a year, and we
I love the name
thanks for that
myself.
question. Yeah. Okay, I see add bike walk, perfect. And Mark, yeah, just send me emails too.
Any other questions for Lisa? Lisa, I would Ryan is, I guess, our official participant, and I'll make sure we reach out to Ryan as well. But from the safety group that we've always been, it's been an active partnership with AARP on people becoming senior drivers, which we all hope to become one day, because the alternative is less desirable. But teaching people how to drive when our abilities become challenged by aging is something that AARP has been very helpful in getting that message out over the years. So anything we can do to help in that area, please let us know.
Yeah, and some of you are already on the list. I know Chris Oliver is already on there. All right, thanks for the opportunity.
All right. The next item is potential legislative items, and Lee has got a prior commitment that she needed to take care of, and I will go over the items that we do have. And several of you have asked to talk about specific bills. But first, I'm going to go over the list of items that Chris has sent out. Just as an FYI, most of those bills did not make crossover. Crossover was last night. What that means is that if a bill doesn't get passed by one of the bodies, either the House or the Senate, then it will not be heard in this session. And any bill that comes after crossover must have some type of physical component involved in it. So if you go down the list there, the first three, S-77, which stands for Senate 117, and House 128, all three of those did not make crossover. House 141, or excuse me, House 140 did make crossover, which I haven't read it in great detail, but there are a number of civilian traffic investigators on the list here, such as 117, so that may cover a number of those. 147 and 148 did not make crossover. House 155 did. And the rest of them on that page one did not make crossover, so that you can see those, the reduced speed limits, the in Durham, the DWI mitigating factors, camera enforcement in school zones, S-219, and the South Park Station traffic citations. On page two, the first two, Senate 249 and Senate 251, did not make crossover as a written. House 261 did not, but Senate Bill 157 actually has gone through both bodies and has been presented to the governor. And then those who have been tracking legislation for more than a few weeks or a few years, you know that the original language as written may or may not be what gets all the way through. So I did take a quick glance at it, and it appeared to be pretty close to to meet at least what the title says. The rest of the bills on this did not make crossover, but there are a number of these that have been picked up in other bills and so forth. So any questions that I can answer on any of those items at this time? All right, hearing none, I'm gonna go to,
Kevin,
yes.
let me just provide a couple of clarifications on a few of those. One is the one concerning civilians and involved in law enforcement and crash investigations. This has been something that the chiefs of police have wanted for a while. You know, it's hard to hire law enforcement these days, and there's some of those functions that they feel strongly that others can do, especially around the investigation piece, that can be done by civilians. So just know that that's something that our law enforcement partners have been asking for a while. The other on 0.05, just know and recognize that that's an idea that's going to come up more and more. They've done this in Utah, in other states. That is likely to actually pass some this year in some other states. This year, it did not pass for a variety of reasons, but none that I think were because folks didn't want to take up the issue. It's just one that's very complicated, touches a whole lot of people, and they weren't all involved in the room before they need to all be involved in the room before something like this gets introduced, because it's such a big change. And on 157, that's the graduated driver's licensing bill. Essentially what that does is provide a window from now until the end of the year in which young people who previously had to go through a 12-month level 1 training only have to go through 6 months. And then starting the first of the year of this, starting on January 1st, there's a permanent change that reduces that 12-month level 1 driving period to 9 months. So a couple of things there. we provided a shortened truncated period last year and gave it an end date. Parents were upset because the end date sometimes was when they were calling to get appointments and they didn't get an appointment until afterwards. Sadly, I suspect that will just, be kicked down for 1 year, though I know there are efforts afoot to potentially change that. And then the other, of course, reducing the driver training period from 12 months to 9 months is something I know a number of people, including some people on this call, have been concerned with, but this is what happened. It's on the governor's desk, and there won't be a veto, I can promise you that. But I know he's not crazy about this, having initially been one of those legislators who sponsored this back in the day when he was in the General Assembly. So anyway, a little more context.
Yeah, and that's not a required for the people to do 9 months. Parents can still require their kids to go longer. And so hopefully we will initiate a study of looking at any potential impacts that change may have to inform legislature in the future.
Yeah, we already have one. I know underway. There's been some back of the napkins calculation that HSRC's done, and we're going to work with HSRC to do more so that they can inform folks of the impact of this and do that in an effective way that we hope will listen to.
And on the civilian traffic crash investigations, I know we've been asked a number of times on our position on that, and the information I passed on that is as long as they're properly trained to do so, I don't believe it would be a great detriment. In fact, it may actually help because a lot of we ask our law enforcement officers to do so many things, and giving them some opportunity to not necessarily rush through trying to fill out a crash report so they can get to the next call or drop a crash report in a draft stage to respond to something else and then come back and finish it up would definitely be advantageous. So I think the emphasis that we put on it was as long as they continue to have similar training as a law enforcement officer for completing these forms and providing that data. And of course, they don't get involved in serious injuries and fatalities. Or I believe injuries. So, all right. There was a few questions. Dale, you had asked about House Bill 198, which is the agency bill. And again, for those who don't understand how sausage is made, sometimes you get ingredients in your sausage that you didn't ask for. And so just because it says agency bill doesn't necessarily mean that's everything that the agent, that everything in that bill is things that we have pursued. It has passed the House and made crossover. You specifically asked about license plate readers. That language in there is to allow the State Bureau of Investigation to put fixed license plate readers in our right-of-way. A number of years ago, we've had a few municipalities approach us about putting license plate readers in our right-of-way. The administration at the time took the position that we do not have any enabling legislation to do so, and that is factual. So that's when a number of municipalities have pursued the ability to put license plate readers in our right-of-way, as you saw with a couple of these bills, and there's been a number of bills in the past as well. So the State Bureau of Investigation has made a very strong push on that. We've met with them a number of times. We've been supportive of it as long as it doesn't, of course, interfere with with, our mission. And, in fact, we've been supportive of pretty much every, LPR bill that's come forward, as long as it doesn't interfere with what DOT has to do. And the people who own the LPRs understand that, if they're put in such a manner that it causes an issue, then they'll get moved or adjusted as necessary. This language, it's quite in depth. It really applies to the SBI. But it does define how the data can be used. And anybody who's followed any of these past rules or these past laws and the bills in the past, that's been the primary hangup is how the data is used and what it is used for. I do want to emphasize that license plate readers are already authorized to be used in the state of North Carolina. They're just generally inside of a law enforcement vehicle. And they do have data restrictions and so forth on it as well. It has been converted to a pilot project with a 1 year, relatively short period of time. So this is assuming that this is going to get passed by, July 1st, and it would expire next July if it were to pass as written. So that's on the license plate readers. Red light cameras. This is another item that DOT, our position on this is we neither support it nor oppose it. We're neutral because we don't manage red light cameras. That's the position that the administration has taken. However, we do allow them on our system through the normal encroachment process. And what this language does is it defines what a violation is. And part of the justification is the technology has surpassed the human's ability of recognizing. In the past, many jurisdictions had somewhere between a 0.25 and a 0.5 second what's called grace period. Those were time periods that the basic normal human being couldn't really perceive or work within. The system defines the violation as when a vehicle enters the intersection or passes the stop bar and travels through the intersection after the completion of the all red interval. So every signal it also, and I believe most cities that have their own signals are following or should be following the state design standards. We are an all red state, which means we have an all red interval between conflicting phases in all of our traffic signals. What this bill does require is that if you're putting in a red light camera and it doesn't have an all red phase, or excuse me, an all red clearance interval, then you're required to have one in. And vehicles entering after the all red will be the ones that can be cited. And it focuses on the violations that create crashes, injuries, and fatalities, and reduces the mantra of revenue generation of photo enforcement. Those who've been in the safety field, photo enforcement is a good tool. The problem with that tool has been it's been used as a revenue generation tool, not in North Carolina, because most of that goes to the school systems, but it has been given a very bad name across the country that cities use it as a way to pad their budget versus it being a safety tool. Any questions on that?
Yeah, so with the license plate reader, obviously the crimes that we would be potentially finding folks for would be different from what would be with a red light or a speed camera. But does that same constitutional issue regarding revenues to the school apply. In other words, if, you know, I have stolen a TV set and the license plate reader finds me for that crime, and I have restitution that needs to be paid for that crime, does that revenue go to the school system?
You're actually not gonna be able to use a license plate reader for that purpose. It has very specific purposes. It's actions related to a criminal investigation, arrest, prosecution, post-conviction, confinement, or supervision, apprehension of an individual with an outstanding felony warrant, locating missing or endangered persons, and locating lost or stolen vehicles. So I guess if someone stole a television set, jumped in
And
a
it had
car and
felony
drove by
warrant
one of
for it.
these, they can use it as trying to track the vehicle down, but it's not used for citation purposes. That this law doesn't, or this bill currently doesn't have a statement in there that it can't be used for traffic enforcement, but every other bill that has proceeded in any form or fashion with license plate readers generally had that statement in it. So this is not a citation item, it's for tracking down the vehicles themselves. All right, House Bill 85. Ike, you'd asked about that. It's for clarifying the use of alcohol screening test. It was referred to the Judiciary 1 committee and it hasn't made it out of that committee. So that bill's dead unless the language gets picked up and added into a bill that has made crossover or one that has a physical component. And when I looked at that bill, it looked like it was just kind of rewriting some of the language, making it easier to use the alcohol screening test in court.
Well, right now, in courts, you can only say whether it's positive or negative as opposed to the number. And they argue that if the officer looks at the number, then the arrest is invalid. But that's the only thing the officer can see. So this was designed to, like 21 other states have, to allow it to be used to establish grounds for the arrest, not for a particular alcohol concentration. But it has been introduced last session, the session before, and got the same result.
So has anybody talked to the testers about just putting a red-green button on it instead of showing a number?
They're expensive enough now. I don't think they get into modifying that. No, the officers still are able to testify positive or negative, and that comes in. It's just the number can't be used, and
Yeah. Okay.
Nobody's buying that defense argument that the arrest is invalid if the officer sees a number. So
Well, that's a good statement that they're not buying that argument. That's
right.
All right. Mike, you'd also asked about House Bill 609 and 615. These are electronic speed measuring systems. One at 609 was for school zones and 615 was for work zones. And I'm going to provide a little bit of a history and a statement that I've provided to others and concerning this issue is, in the past, NCDOT has we've been very supportive of electronic enforcement, especially in school zones and work zones. The language that's in these bills is different from what we've supported in the past. However, the legislature has been very reluctant to consider electronic enforcement measures due to the misuse of these systems across the country. Very easy to find reports of revenue generating programs that have had little to no safety value They basically target high violation areas, even if there are not any safety issues. This is what gave electronic enforcement such a bad reputation. In some cities, is now a reoccurring budget item, reoccurring budget revenue item, which is more important to them than the safety concept is what they're arguing. There is a push from the American Road and Transportation Builders Association, that's ARPTA, to get more electronic enforcement across the country. There have been measurable safety improvements in places where these laws have been implemented. For those who are in favor of electronic enforcement, especially in work zones, you know, talking to members of ARPTA, which is pretty much most sizable construction companies, the AGC and those type folks, they may help support some of this language as well. There are some issues with, or I believe there may be some issues with the language having DOT being the enforcement agency on these bills. Outside of license and theft, we don't really have much of an enforcement capability. And it's possible that I missed this, but whether or not we can, contract or work directly with the local law enforcement agencies in these areas, it wasn't clear to me on that. And there's also, funding of the operations of one of these systems. The bill doesn't address the funding of that. It does send the money to one of the bills, maybe both of them, create a I believe it's called as people one of them up here. Just it creates a special fund that the violation or the payments go to. It's a civil penalty litigation fund where 75% of those civil penalties are paid pursuant 20-141.7, and the other monies appropriated or otherwise directed by the General Assembly. So there's a question of a constitutionality on that, because our state constitution does have a pretty direct statement of where traffic violations penalty payments go to, and it doesn't talk about how how these systems could be funded. Some past court cases have said that 10% of the funding could go to collecting these funds, and that's a little ambiguous in this bill. So that's kind of the work zone bill did have a limit on the number of concurrent work zones that we could operate this in. I believe it was like 25 that the secretary could look at. The other thing on that, just again, from a little bit of a history standpoint, there have been some, I guess, legislative attempts to repeal the $250 additional penalty that was established many years ago in work zones, because they felt like it was too frequently used. So there may, some limits to the what was in Section 6 could consider applying to either high exposure, where workers have a high exposure, or requiring a higher crash rate, something to help the General Assembly get beyond some of these issues that they have been reluctant to pass in the past. But any other bills? I do. I'll tell you, we have continued to support. I know a number of municipalities have supported language to have a 25 mile per hour speed limit in their residential areas. I would encourage you guys to, instead of saying residential areas, consider, roadways that are unmarked. Because even though, land use and things of that nature may have residential, but in North Carolina, we seem to have people living on all roads, with the exception of interstates. And I'm sure there's someone living on an interstate somewhere, because everything that you can, you know, it occurs once at least somewhere. But anyway, something that drivers can easily define. If a driver does not understand what an unmarked road is, then we may need to ask the commissioner to look into their ability to whether or not they can operate a motor vehicle. So markings are easy to recognize. You either have a center line and or an edge line, or you don't, under that scenario. And most of the places where we do not have center lines and edge lines are the areas where we like to have the lower speed roadways. A lot of residential streets, a lot of neighborhood streets, as well as some of the unpaved roads. Dale, I see your hand is raised.
Yes, thank you for that advice. I will pass that along to the city of Durham, because they've introduced this bill, I think, at least a couple of times.
Yeah.
I did want to ask if you could clarify something you said earlier. I think you said that the department's position on the speed safety cameras has been sort of neutral. And I guess I was wondering if you could just clarify that in light of the recommendations of the Strategic Highway Safety Plan.
This was the red light cameras, or the changes to the language of the red light cameras, Dale. It wasn't to the speed cameras. We have been supportive of electronic enforcement and speed. We've also been supportive of electronic enforcement and red light cameras. The revisions to the law of redefining what is a violation is the item that we are neutral on.
Gotcha. Thank you so much for clarifying that.
So Kevin, just to be clear, when the local legislation on red light cameras came up, so DOT's position was support?
We have always supported red light cameras as a safety tool. In fact, the first time it actually got discussed in North Carolina, the town of Cary had won a federal grant to install red light cameras. We worked with them to identify the locations to install them where they were having elevated angle collisions, and their town council rejected the grant. But we have supported the use of electronic enforcement as a safety measure, because the data shows that it is an effective measure. This committee has looked at this topic on a number of occasions around red light cameras. It's probably been about 10 years ago, plus or minus a few years, that we had Dr. Forrest Counsel from, the past director of the Highway Safety Research Center, nationally and internationally renowned safety investigator and researcher, review this topic, and it was very clear that that there was a safety advantage to using photo enforcement for red light cameras. Now, that wasn't it wasn't a huge $1 million benefit, but it clearly did have a benefit, and the benefits outweighed the negative aspects that folks were saying were occurring.
Okay, well, that's great. I was just surprised, but frankly pleased, when you said that the department had the official position of supporting this, because generally I know the department stays neutral on a lot of things on, safety and otherwise. And so if we put ourselves in that support category for that, that's positive.
Well, yeah, the implementation, and that's always where, the devil's in the details of the implementation. You know, photo enforcement, just like with red light cameras, with speed cameras, you know, you generally are gonna have to set a threshold. And whatever that threshold is, thank you, Commissioner. Whatever that threshold is, has to be consistent and it really needs to be, understood, by the people who are implementing it. The city of Charlotte had a, speed camera pilot program a number of years ago. In my opinion, it was a very successful program. They didn't advertise their threshold, but they had a threshold. And quite frankly, the states that have established a legislative threshold have actually still seen substantial benefits from red light cameras. I mean, excuse me, speed cameras. Unfortunately, what we're seeing today is that you have such a large number of folks who are exceeding the speed limits, 5 miles an hour. Today, that's really not much of a worry. You can still have problems at 5 miles an hour, 10 miles an hour, but there's so many people who are choosing to go, 15, 20 and higher above the speed limit. There wouldn't be an issue of probably having a legislative threshold of 8, 9, 10 miles per hour. These systems would still not have a problem of finding plenty of misbehavior of people choosing to do that. I think we mentioned that conversation about the news reporting that the Charlotte Observer and the News and Observer did a number of, I guess it's been about a year or so ago now, but of the thousands of people who have repeated events of being cited of going 20 plus over. And I would point to the work that the Highway Safety Research Center did on the repeat offenders, people, not alcohol repeat offenders, but the traffic violation, people who have multiple traffic violations did have a higher propensity of getting involved in wrecks and so forth, which I don't, I would love for us to take another look at how to expand that study, but it's very clear that the folks who are, it's not the people who are pushing the envelope, a little bit. It's the people who are pushing the envelope substantially that are causing the problem. So. And everybody that I talk to about speeding, I always say, one of your best tools is your cruise control. If you set your cruise control at the speed limit and stay to the right, you don't have to worry about what other people are doing. If you feel like you're in a race to go wherever those folks are going, that sounds like a problem between the steering wheel and the seat. You're generally not racing people somewhere. Your goal should be to get home safely and in a reasonable amount of time, and very, very few times if even a moment of good planning you can achieve that measure. Those who've been on the committee for quite some time remember Chairman David King bringing up that he was forced to speed, and the state traffic engineer at the time said that was a cop-out. It was me who said that. I told him it was a cop-out. Just because other people are speeding doesn't give you a reason. That's that's the old adage. If everybody jumped off the roof, are you going to too? So that's my soapbox on speeding and traffic violations. So any other questions about legislative items? I do have one more item that Dale had asked us to talk about. and that has to do with, an ICE program, which is intersection control, evaluation. Then, Joe Humber had presented at at the MPO conference and others at other places that, our ICE policy that we were working on has fallen through and gave a very grim outlook. You know, Joe is new to government. He's only been working with government. I guess you can count university as government, but you know, I think most people would say they're a little different. With government, you always play the long game. You know, whether it's laws or policies, you continue working on these items and working them through. And you know, there will be success one day on these topics. It just has to, you know, we should not give up of developing our ICE policy, nor getting it implemented either in a small scale, whether it's with safety funds, or to a larger scale, whether it's on all TIP projects as well as all developer projects. So, you know, so that's my encouragement on that. One of the concerns about the ICE policy is that it becomes prescriptive, and there's a lot of engineers who like prescriptiveness when it comes to certain items, but most you know, most other people do not like prescriptive policies when it comes to the decisions they have to make, and that's some of the what I would call is some of the rub there, Dale. So I can use examples of other policies that and other things that we've done over the years that there is usually unfortunately a time gap between the first time it was introduced for discussion to when it becomes policy. Sometimes it may be years, and sometimes longer than that. You know, when we look at our median barrier policy, that was a long time in the works, as well as our rumble strip policies on our rural highways, which still is in constant modification. So any other questions on the ICE policy or draft?
Well, I guess, is there any, well, two questions. Is the draft available for review? And is there anything that this committee or friends of this committee could do to sort of help push that along?
Yes, we can provide a draft of what was provided, and we'll send this out. Chris, if you could, you know, work with Brian and Joe to get that, and we'll send it out. The things I would encourage this committee, if they see that and want to help push it, there's a couple options. One is to you can always work at the local level. You know, many cities, Charlotte, Durham, others have developed good policies and practices at the local level that we may have difficulty implementing at a statewide level. And then, you know, then we can come back and copy you guys. Won't be the first time, won't be the last time. And then the other thing would be is to encourage where we can apply it in the department. And you know, that might be something Brian and his staff may want to consider with you know, safety projects and as well as mobility projects that you know, transportation mobility and safety fund. And since CMAC is in my area now, then, we would also, you know, potentially look at that as well.
Thank you very much.
All right, if there's, no further questions on those items, I think the next item, on the agenda is, are there anybody, I've given enough updates and remarks from DOT. Are there any other agencies wishing to provide some information? Hearing none, I will make one more plea, on some of the legislative items. Usually every year, I bring this up. It's a little late now in this legislative session, but legislative sessions are like summers. You miss it this year, you can always get it next year. But DOT, we're one of the multiple agencies involved, both in the executive committee. There are going to be things that will be difficult for our agency to get introduced. We are a cabinet agency, so we have to get things approved through our administration, the governor's office, and then it goes over to the transportation chairs. There are multiple paths to get things introduced, and either through municipalities, there's other state agencies, and there's other folks who have lobbying and political activity. I would encourage those groups to, if you got items that you're wanting to discuss, bring it forward before the next legislative session. Let's have a conversation about it. We have had instances where the executive committee, since it is not just a DOT committee, it's a committee of more than DOT, whether or not we, would write a resolution of support and carry that on as well. And so basically I'm saying is, we can't always count on DOT as being the only one carrying the legislative and policy change water, because of some of our constraints as well that we have. And they come and go depending upon various opinions of our, administration and leadership. I will double down on Secretary Boyette's commitment to safety. He's had some pretty strong support and language, and sometimes things don't go our way. It doesn't mean that we're going to come out and preach against the bill or make our objections publicly noted, because we too also have to have a budget in order to continue our operations. So, but there's a lot of work that gets done behind the scenes, and sometimes things don't go your way, and you grin and bear it, and you try again, next year or on another bill. So, all right, our next meeting, and I'll have to talk to Chris about possibly a reschedule of that, but we're looking at a early September meeting, and any updates we'll let you know hopefully soon. There's no other items. We'll give you back 30 minutes of your day.
I apologize. I did have one other question about the status of the white papers that I think there
Oh,
were
yes, you're
several
right.
that were being worked on.
I'm sorry, Dale. You did ask for that, Chris.
Yeah,
Did-
Yeah, I do have a brief update. Again, I thank you for, I guess, all the authors of the white papers. Because as you know, it was kind of a voluntary effort for those that were writing the white papers. So the white papers, couple of them are still kind of being finalized, but the one that is ready to be shared with the committee is the older driver white paper, which Ann Dickerson actually authored that. So I guess in terms of next steps, I guess ideally we can actually share the paper with the committee for you to actually review. And from there, it's really up to the executive committee what they'd like to do as far as next steps, whether that be additional research, the pilot programs, or create a task groups responsible for kind of advancing the topics within the white paper. So it's kind of a brief update on where we are with the white papers.
All right, and once those are completed, we'll send them out. And folks will have an opportunity to review them and provide, you can always provide comments, even if it's finished. All right, James, I got your message about work zones and speed humps. Speed humps and speed bumps and rumble strips, those are all different designed items. Putting a speed hump in would be pretty substantial in a work zone, depending upon the speed of the work zone itself. But what I'll do is I'll reach out to you offline to better clarify my understanding of what you're suggesting. Okay. All right.
Sounds good.
Everyone have a good day and have a great weekend.
Take care, everybody.
Thank you.
Right.